I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for joining us here on Closing Arguments. The search for the truth in this case has been difficult, extremely difficult for this jury. They've been at it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and again today. Working hard, locked in that room, 12 of them together, trying to agree as to what happened to John O'Keefe. And then what does it mean when you figure that out and take into consideration the instructions of the judge, the law in the case? We haven't gotten a verdict yet. Take a listen to Judge Beverly Cannone once again speaking to the jury after they had sent her a note saying, "We are deadlocked."
Dear Judge Cannone, I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict, signed by the foreperson. We all know how hard you've been working. Lunch will be arriving shortly. When it comes, I'd ask you to clear your heads, have lunch, and begin your deliberations again. Or continue your deliberations, all right? So I'm sending you back out.
So after that, the jury went back in another 3.5 hours of deliberations and not reaching a verdict on this Friday. They had reached a conclusion initially amongst themselves. They're like, we're gonna agree to disagree here. But the way it works in a trial, as we've seen time and time again, is that it's gonna take a couple more notes before this judge declares a mistrial and says this is a hung jury. So they're back at it. They'll be back on Monday. So what I wanted to spend some time doing tonight, right now, is to try to get into the minds of all the people and players involved in all of this. This is a very stressful situation, to say the least, for everyone involved, whether it's the family of John O'Keefe, whether it is Karen Read herself, the attorneys, the judge, the supporters from both sides of this case, and ultimately the jury who must make this decision. So let me bring in my expert. I want to bring her in right away. Forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman is with us on this Friday night. Dr. Lieberman, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with getting inside these jurors' minds and what they're dealing with. This is a high-profile case around the country now, but where they're from, Norfolk County, this is like everyone is talking about it. Like it's getting so bad. Matt Johnson was reporting that there are places of business downtown that won't allow employees to talk about it at work because it's so divisive. And you're talking about an officer who's been killed. You're talking about a woman charged with the murder. You've got allegations of police misconduct, of her being framed, of dirty cops, all of it. Do they feel the pressure and the bigness and the importance of this moment that they're involved in?
Yes, I think that they do. You know, before any trial, the attorneys do what's called voir dire, asking prospective jurors different questions about their life and so on, and about how they feel about certain things. Like in this case, they probably asked whether they had any run-ins with police or what do they think about police, things like that. But you can't control for what's called unconscious bias. And even though these prospective jurors may say, oh yes, I would be able to just look at the evidence and, you know, objectively tell you what I think and come to a verdict and so on, they may think that and want that, but that may not be true. Now, what's interesting, particularly today, I think one of the reasons why they unconsciously aren't coming to a verdict, I mean, I think it was way too soon for them to ask you know, to say we can't come to a verdict, because there were 657 exhibits, 74 witnesses, 10 weeks of trial. I mean, it's not really asking too much to have them deliberate a little longer. But I think today might hold the key, because as you were saying, what happened today is that, you know, there have been pretty much every day supporters for Karen Read. And that is intimidating to jurors. I think the jurors should absolutely have been sequestered. I think if they had been sequestered, this whole, they would have come to a verdict already, perhaps. But in any case, today, now that there were people who came out, besides the intimidating for Karen Read, free Karen Read, all of that, now there are people for John O'Keefe. And I think that jurors who, of course, pass by this each time they come into the courthouse, I think that will give, if there are people holding out because they don't want to find her guilty because of the repercussions that might happen to them in town, people being angry at them for finding her guilty. I think perhaps now that they see that there are these other protesters and, that there's a little more leeway, this might allow them to feel more comfortable in actually finding her guilty. Of something, of one of the things.
Right, and
maybe
there
not
are
murder.
options here. So if the majority is in the guilty of something camp, there's places for them to go. But if the majority is not guilty, as Rick Grundy pointed out to us last hour, there's no room to really negotiate. It's either if it's not guilty, it's like just not guilty. There's no lesser not guilty. There's not like, not really guilty. There's just not guilty. So let's talk about Karen Read now, because this is her life. That the liberty of the rest of her life is at stake for her. Let's take a look and a listen to her arriving to court today.
Alan, how are you feeling this morning?
Great. Are you surprised there's no verdict?
Karen, how are you feeling this morning?
Karen, what will you do if you're found guilty?
So this is the arrival today. Your thoughts, your quick thoughts on that, Dr. Lieberman?
Sure. Well, some of the jurors may have been turned off Karen Read because of her smirking and her laughing and her, looking cocky and talking about how they don't have anything on me. She told Matt that one day, there's no real case here. And so that, I think, has been a turnoff to some jurors. But today, now she's not quite as cocky because I think they expected the jury to come back quickly with a not guilty verdict. And now, they're a little more concerned.
Now, I want to show Karen Read leaving the courtroom. Now, this is after the jury came back with that note saying that they were deadlocked and the judge sent them back to deliberate. Let's take a listen.
Alan, what's your reaction to the note? What will you do with the hung jury?
It's going to be a hung jury case.
I'll tell you what, that's the least happy I've ever seen her during the course of this trial in any of the walks around the courthouse. What are you seeing here?
Yes, absolutely. Her face looks very serious, taut. It's like, how is this happening to me? Yes, very different. Before she was, like smiling and I think if not giving autographs, sort of acting like that, like she should be.
Yeah, and the dynamic there is that all these people that she didn't know beforehand support her, some, raising money for her as well. And she does take time and acknowledges them and has been throughout. This moment's getting a little more tense, though, as we can all see. Now I want to show her at the end of the day. So this is after today's over. And tell me if you see or hear any difference here as we watch her.
Well, I think she's getting more glum as the day has progressed, and less receptive to talking to people and, just thinking that everything's going to go her way. It's very interesting. I think that there's also another aspect to this is, as you know, of course, that juries tend to suddenly come up with a verdict or more easily come up with a verdict when it's a Friday. and this week, next week is going to be July 4th. So they probably have plans for July 4th, and they don't want to still be in the jury box.
That was the shocker.
It
was a shocker on a Friday, but they sort of came to an agreement that they couldn't agree, and then the judge sent them back, and no more notes, so they'll be back on Monday. Dr. Carol Lieberman, we're out of time for tonight, but thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak again soon.